Thank you to everyone who's tuned in to tonight's live at the virtual table. We will get started in about 30 seconds. Thank you again to everyone who is joining us for At the Virtual Table with Laura Washington and Lynn Sweet. Here is Laura Washington.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome to the show, everyone. We have two big guests tonight. We'll be talking infrastructure, Washington politics, all things Donald Trump, and much more. But first, you have to know that the Sun-Times has amped up our digital offerings to bring you everything you need to know, everything that's in the Sun-Times, wherever you are. You can get the Sun-Times e-paper, which is a daily digital replica of the print product that lives 24/7 at paper.suntimes.com. You can get that with our special digital offer that gives you unlimited access to both the e-paper and every story on suntimes.com for only $2.49 a month. Cannot be beat. You can learn more and subscribe now at suntimes.com/subscribe. I will be introducing our first guest, U.S. Representative Marie Newman, in just a moment.
And I'll be talking to Wall Street Journal reporter and author Michael Bender, who's the author of the new book just out this week. Frankly, we did win the election, the inside story of how Trump lost. But we're going to start first with the conversation with Marie Newman. Michael, I see you're with us, but just bear with us a little bit. Kickback, you could do something else because we'll talk to Marie Newman first, and then we'll be all ready to talk to you. And we're all excited to see and talk about some of the inside stuff in your book. So bear with us. And now, Laura, back to you.
Thank you, Lynn. U.S. Representative Marie Newman, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Marie Newman is a freshman member of the U.S. Congress representing Illinois' 3rd Congressional District, which covers the southwest side of Chicago and surrounding suburbs. Among her other assignments, she serves as the U.S. House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, which is a very timely role given President Biden's massive infrastructure initiative. Tomorrow, she'll be joining Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and an array of other Illinois elected officials at a freight facility in Bedford Park and at the 95th Street CTA Red Line station to talk infrastructure. Good to have you with us, Marie. You're just getting your wings going as a freshman, but you're already pretty busy. I wanted to really focus first on the topic of the day, the news of the day, and that's the meetings and the traveling you're going to do tomorrow with the Transportation Secretary. What is the key thing? What is your key takeaway that you want people to know about this visit tomorrow?
You know, I think it's important to note that what we like about this visit, it is the convergence of what everybody's concerned about is building an infrastructure plan that is framed in equity and the green economy. And we're thrilled that the secretary is really interested in those things as well. We're going to bring him to the 95th Street station on the Red Line to show him how the CTA has addressed accessibility issues. Interestingly enough, and it's hard to believe, not all transit stations are ADA accessible, which is infuriating, right? So Senator Duckworth has introduced in the Senate, and I've introduced in the House, the ASAP bill that would shore up all of those stations. And so we're going to spend a little time talking about that. And then we're heading over to the intermodal CSX Beltway Railroad Center in Bedford Park in my district to talk about the CREATE program. And you all know what that is. That's the public and private consortium of railway carriers as well as public transit and the whole of government. And they've done just tremendous work. And so we're going to talk about that very unique program to the secretary.
So these are both existing projects. These are, as you said, there's been some work already done on the CTA, obviously a lot more to do in terms of accessibility. Right. What do these existing projects have to do with Joe Biden's forward-looking plan that the initiative he wants to get through Congress?
Right, so we're looking forward, right? So the Build Back Better program, the premise of it is to make sure that we become a world-class infrastructure country again. Right now, we're the 13th, if you can believe that. And it's not just that we are interested in being number one. We need to bring this country into the 21st century and start electrifying our railways and our buses and our transit systems and make sure we have a greener environment, but also get people back on transit. That's the fastest and soonest way we're going to get to some of our green goals and address this climate crisis. Similarly, we have transportation deserts everywhere. Right in my district, Laura, there's like 15 of them where people, public transit starts here, and then you can go miles before you can pick up public transit. Filling in those gaps will allow people to get to their jobs and build their businesses.
And potentially, how much money? I know this is still a huge moving target, but how much money could we see coming to Illinois, coming to your district if this plan is successful?
Well, right now, and we know this can change, but right now the bipartisan package looks like the American Jobs Act, the infrastructure portion of that will be 1.2 trillion, and it could be in the billions, but we obviously hasn't gone through committee yet completely, so we have to do that work yet, but we could see billions. It would be very significant. This Jobs Act could create anywhere between 1 and 3 million jobs, frequently green union jobs.
Okay, 1 to 3 million jobs in Illinois?
No, not in the country, Laura.
Country, okay. Lynn.
Sorry, Laura. So here's the thing. I like to get real here. Congresswoman Newman, freshman, and we do want to hear about your freshman year. And I just want to do something. And this is the wonderful thing of live shows. I just want to make sure, Mike, are you okay if we don't get to you until the top of the hour? If not, we could juggle things around. We're live and we can make maybe some adjustments. Are you good to hang out until we talk to you? If not,
yeah, sure. Is it, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, and you're on live. And so now everyone at least sees Michael C. Bender, the author, who we're going to get to a little sneak preview. But
yeah, I mean, do you want me to just pop in back in at
introduce you. We'll do this formal. Here's what's great, Laura and Congresswoman. This, by the way, you should two meet. Congresswoman Newman, meet Michael Bender from the Wall Street Journal.
Hello, Michael.
Hi there.
And isn't this kind of great? We have our little community at the table. So Laura, tonight we're all at the table, except we're going to first talk to Congresswoman Newman. So Michael, stand.
Yeah, of course.
Why? Maybe I could get some sense of what reality is. You're one of the progressives, Congresswoman, and the progressives may not like the deal. It only takes 4 of you in the House to hold up the bill. Now, Bernie Sanders said it's okay with him. You're a progressive. So before we start spending the money and talking about this project and that, are you going to be in, even though it's not everything that the progressives who you're a part of wanted?
Right. So let's be clear, all of the work we've done, Lynn, in the last 6 or 7 weeks. So our chair, Pramila Jayapal of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, has done a lot of groundwork to make sure our priorities were in the American Families Act and in the infrastructure bill. What we have learned last night in this final round of negotiations is that indeed those priorities are in there. So I'm very happy to vote for both of these things. They seem to be holding up.
So it's just the funding level isn't going to be what Sanders wanted.
Oh, it wasn't the original level, right. But I think we all are pragmatists, right? We know that we were never going to get to that top number, but you have to ask for a big number to get to the middle number.
Okay, so if it's good enough for Bernie Sanders and it's good enough for Representative Newman, do you think it's going to be good enough for even the people who are more to the left than you are? Do you think there's going to be a problem here?
No, I think that, so here's the great thing about the Progressive Caucus is that we stay very knitted together, and we've had these discussions. In fact, I'm part of the executive board of the Progressive Caucus. I'm the vice chair of communications, and we had expressly this meeting to discuss what are we willing to do and what is the work that's going on to ensure that our top 5 priorities are in these bills. And it appears that everything is hanging together based on what the reporting we're hearing even as early as this morning. So I assume we're going to be fine. And for the record, you're right, Lynn, it didn't get to the number that we wanted it to be, but I think we all knew that.
Okay, so one of the things, so our listeners now, Marie Newman ran as the outsider. She was the outside agitator. She defeated Congressman Dan Lipinski. I covered his father, Bill Lipinski. You know, I go back and I know the district. And so now you became an insider, and you were mad at Nancy Pelosi because she didn't want people to work on the campaigns of people like you who challenged incumbent Democrats.
Right.
So now that you're there and you've been a freshman, do you see things a little differently? And could you tell us the 2 things that you learned that you wouldn't have thought you knew now that you are actually in office and you're part of the establishment that you ran against?
So interesting. I can tell you things I've learned, maybe not exactly neatly in those buckets. So I'll share a couple of examples. One is that on my committees, on T&I and on small business, there are some moderate Republicans that you can actually have agreements with. I didn't think that was possible, so that was good news to me. You know, on the second side of things, I can see, and I actually said this in my primary, Lynn, and we may even had this chat about that. Not every primary should happen. I was challenged. My predecessor happened to be to the right of the district and wasn't in alignment. I still maintain that, and we're much more in alignment now. There are primary challengers that will come in where they're not completely in alignment with the district, and it's America. Everybody should run who wants to run, but I don't necessarily support every single primary. So I guess what is not a surprise to me is that not every primary should be looked at equally. Do I welcome some primaries? Yeah, there probably are some that I haven't analyzed any of them yet, but there are probably some that I will welcome. But there will be others that I just don't see how that's going to be an improvement or different.
Okay, just in how Congress works, what as a freshman did you learn that you didn't know that you needed to know? Maybe how it works.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? The reconciliation process was very different than I thought it was. It was a little bit more complicated, shall we say. So the good news is that it is a combination of they give you preparation and orientation, but then it's a little baptism by fire as you go through it. So that was an eye-opener.
Okay, you could give us an example. I mean, something that, you know, that you sort of stumbled over that surprised you.
Well, sometimes, you know, like what they're pretty good at is giving out of committee, giving you the full bill with enough time to read it. Now, sometimes it's a 500 or 1,000 page bill, but frequently it's a 2, 3 to 10 page bill. So they give you plenty of time to read it. That I thought we might not have that luxury. But conversely, on budgets, those go down to the wire. And so you're looking at a budget as you're walking to vote on it. And that was not so great for me, because I like to spend time with a budget.
Sure.
So,
well, how do you make a rational, informed decision in a situation like that?
The good news is that frequently my legislative staff is having one-on-ones with the committee teams on budgets. So I get little pieces as we go, and it kind of comes together as we go to vote. So the culmination of their knowledge and my knowledge together, me having talked to the authors of the budgets, all comes together as we go. But sometimes it's down to the wire, and that's a little frustrating sometimes.
So one of the things I want to get into is that no one would have foreseen is your office on Capitol Hill is across the hall, you know where I'm going, from Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I'm guessing most of our listeners know she is so extreme that the Democrats stripped her of her committee assignments. She has said she is a Trumpite, but being in agreement with Trump policies isn't what we're about when we talk about Greene and criticize her. She has said hateful things. She's an election denier, provocateur, and one of the things she did was make a personal attack on you. And I wrote about this. You got a lot of attention. One of your children is trans, and there is a trans issue on the floor of Congress. You spoke to it. And she then kind of picked on you with your office across, and she wrote a sign. I don't even want to repeat it and give it credence, but it was nasty, especially since she knew you would see it. So my question is, since that incident, since you are across the hall, have you seen her? Is there any sense of relationship? Give us an update, please.
Yeah, so that sign is still there. It's still hateful. And all of her behavior, her hate and her spewing is indicative of who she is. And so it says nothing about the issue or the topic, which is just equality, which is, the LGBTQ plus community is not asking for more or less. They're just asking for equality. And that's very reasonable. What I will say about Representative Taylor Greene is that she's deeply broken, and I hope she gets help.
Well, it sounds like, Marie, you're saying you don't have any relationship with her. Has there been any opportunity or to talk to her, to talk to perhaps some of her intermediaries, because this, right across the hall, you've got what I would view as a very hateful response to a very personal part of your life. So
yeah, I honestly, I just ignore her and block her out. She's not a serious member of Congress. I'm there to do very serious business. My district is in trouble and needs my help. And I'm on the ground as much as I physically can be. And I am fighting for small businesses and working families all day long and twice on Sundays. So I largely ignore her.
No, she was.
Lynn, I want to stay on Evie, your daughter, for a moment. There was a wonderful piece in Teen Vogue about your relationship, about her, about your work together. Tell our audience, who is Evie? How did she come out? How did you become aware of who she really is? And how has all that informed you as a policymaker? How has that changed you as a policymaker, if at all?
Yeah, and I think that any parent would say this, that we learn so much from our kids, right? And I had been an ally of LGBTQ plus community for decades, right? But when Evie became very depressed 2 years before she came out, we tried everything. We took her to therapy. We had her in groups. We worked on programs and events and friendships and everything we could possibly do, medication included. And what she finally realized after we put her in a wonderful program that helped her understand this was that she was not being her authentic self. And I don't know if either of you have ever tried to not be yourself. It's extremely hard. And think about doing that for a week, a month, or years or decades. So she, when she came out to us, I tell this story and she laughs about it a little bit because I was very excited. So we're sitting at dinner. She had been in her program for maybe a week or two. And she said, "Mom, I figured it out." And I said, "Oh, that's great, honey. What did you figure out today?" And she said, No, I figured it out." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And she said, "I am not a boy. I'm a girl. And my name is Evie." And I threw my hands in the air and I was super excited because can you imagine the day that your child figures out who she is? It's that burden is taken, that backpack is taken off of her shoulders, and she has a whole new lease on life. It's a great day. It was a great day in our family. And I'm thrilled that she's found herself and she's really hit her stride. She is doing some activism for a wide variety of topics and working really hard. So we're so proud of her.
And how old is she now?
She is 20.
So she was 18 when she came out?
No, she came out 6 years ago, Laura. She
okay.
came out when she was 14.
Wonderful. Yeah. So my second question was, how does this affect you as a policymaker? How does it affect your work, this personal experience with her?
Right. Well, just like anything that I advocate, whether it is for, working families, healthcare, economic inequity, all of those things, you may or may not have had the lived experience, but you can see it up close and personal and really understand it. So what I've had the great honor of doing is seeing the highs and the lows and everything in between, so that I can understand it much better. So it has really helped me understand what someone feels like when they're being discriminated against. And it's horrible, or when they're not allowed to be their authentic self. So what I always say is that, it's beyond just walking in their shoes. It's really sitting down and thinking about what we can do better as allies to whatever community needs our help.
I have a question again about the freshman experience.
Sure.
Do you realize how hard it was to pass a bill when you actually got there, to know what an uphill battle it is to do it and how rare it is to have any bill with your name on it actually get passed? Could you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I was shocked because we've introduced probably 7 or 8 bills now. 2 of my bills that I co-led on have actually passed the House, Lynn. And so I had been warned about that, and I just assumed like nothing would pass. I was bracing for that. But this microloan bill that I co-led on that would allow owners of color of small businesses, in fact, the smallest of small, to have access to capital vis-a-vis the microloan federal program. And then I created a Transparency Act that was accompanied it. I was shocked when it passed, but then I'm also surprised on some of these other things that we've put forth that no one seems to have interest in. But by and large, and this is a surprise, this is back to your first question, is that everyone thinks the Democratic caucus has all of these, kind of disparate groups. We are very glued together. If you look at the statistics on this docket, frequently we have unanimous votes. So we are hanging together pretty close. And the fact that we have gotten all of these negotiations to move forward is nothing short of spectacular. So I'm actually surprised we're as glued together as we are.
Really? So
Yeah.
One of the things, though, that and I'm jumping around to just what is on the minds of so many members in Illinois who are Democrats, we are going to lose a seat.
Right.
What are your, given that Illinois and David Mossman from the Cook Political Report made a point of how important Illinois is and the Democrats keeping the House, because we're one of the few states where gerrymandering is good, because the Democrats are in control of the state House, the state Senate, and the governorship. So, people in Illinois have, even though Barack Obama and Eric Holder lead this national charge against Republican redistricting, when the system is rigged, you have some thumbs on the scale and your favorite looks a little different in Illinois, be that as it may. What do you see is the role of the delegation then in the Democrats? Are you working as a group, or is it going to be every man and woman for themselves in redistricting? Do you think, so if you can answer that, and then I'll tell you the second question you can incorporate in it. It's pretty clear that because of population losses that will come, that you could lose 1 Republican seat. You're going to lose, of the seat you're going to lose, do you see a way of making it 2?
Oh, losing 2 seats?
Making there are 5 Republicans now. We'll lose a seat, and it's clear that the downstate districts, the map makers will pit people together, and probably Mary Miller, Representative Green's friend, she is probably the one who will either come out, she will be pitted with another Republican, and that will be a big test of Trump and Trumpism. But in the meantime, do you think there's a way to even get rid of another Republican? So you have some insurance for Democrats holding the House.
Yeah, I mean, we're still going to have as many or more Democratic seats, I assume. This process is set up by a state statute. They have to follow it. I don't know as though we'll have a lot of input. I'm a freshman, as you cited, and I don't know if we'll have a lot of input. I think it's largely like a family. You get what you get, and you love and take care of.
No, if you just sit around, this is, I think, my 4th remap. You may think you just get an assignment. It doesn't work that way. You're going to.
What I will say, and I'll tell you what I know, Lynn, is that I'm sure at some point, and they've told me that we can provide input. My point is that I can't control what they do with that input, right? I can advocate for my amazing district all day long, but I don't know I don't know if what will happen with that input. It's largely you get your family and you take care of your family.
Okay, so we'll see how.
Of course I'm going to advocate, but and here's my theory is that, look, we're losing a seat, right? So we're all going to grow. We're all going to have a larger amount of population in each district, very clearly. So I assume it'll grow. How that grows, no idea.
Well, Marie, do you have, if you had your druthers in terms of what you want your district to look like when this is all said and done,
Oh,
how does
gosh,
you like to, you want to
Yeah.
keep it the same, but that's not going to happen. So what parts of the district or how would you like to see it shift?
Ideally, I'd like to keep city and suburbs.
Mhm.
I think it's really important to have that blend and to have that. We're a very knitted together district, and we all kind of have the same mindset. And I really like that. So my hope is that I still have city and suburbs together.
What's the proportion right now in terms of city versus suburbs?
Depending, voting population, it's somewhat the 50-50. In terms of geography, obviously the city has smaller geography than the
Right, but
suburbs.
you want to keep 11 and 23.
I want to keep all of them, all the awards.
Yes.
Did you have to mend fences with House Speaker Pelosi because you were critical of her move to try, and you were handcuffed for a while in getting campaign staff because of the edict of not to let rogue Democrats challenge incumbents in primaries? How did you fix that?
You know what? That's interesting. You asked that, Lynn. I'm not sure we ever had a discussion about it. We have a good relationship, but I'm not sure I don't think we ever discussed it, to be honest with you. We just moved forward. I mean, honestly, my mantra as I was elected is that, have an open mind about everything and move forward. And that really has proven to be a good thing because you have a lot of work to do and you can't worry about something that happened in the campaign. It's just not worth it.
Done. So what member do you look to as a model? Maybe someone who's a few terms ahead of you that, when I'm here another term, I want to be like so-and-so or something.
Oh gosh, that's a really long list.
I want to, because we're almost near the end, and I think Laura has some finishing questions before we get to Michael C. Bender, the author of the new book about Donald Trump, who'll be on in a few minutes. Michael, stand by. We're going to soon get to you. But I just name you a few people or that you want to be like them when you get a little more experience.
And you know what? I'll amend that, add to Lynn's question to wrap us up. But who on the other side of the aisle, Republican? Obviously, Marjorie Taylor Greene is not someone that you can work with. But what Republicans out there who you've already started to build a relationship with that you're close to?
All right, I'll go in chronological order. So, Lynn, there's many folks in the Progressive Caucus: Pramila Jayapal, Barbara Lee, Jan Schakowsky, Ro Khanna, Robin Kelly from CBC. She's been an amazing mentor to me. So there's literally dozens. That's just a few. But in terms of Laura, to your question regarding Republicans, I've done my first 4 or 5 bills were with a Republican co-lead. So I've done work with Maria Salazar from Florida, some folks on the Small Business Committee, and I'm hoping to do more work with Brian Fitzpatrick, John Katko, and a few others, because we do agree on some things with regard to transportation and infrastructure, jobs, the economy, and making sure small business is able to thrive in this country. So there is agreement. Are there tons of things to disagree with them? Oh, 100%. But I'm trying to find some middle ground where we can get some things done.
And we'll probably be hearing more about the agreements and disagreements for quite a while to come. Yep. I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Representative Marie Newman. Thanks. Good luck on your big tour tomorrow, and we hope to see you again back on the show again soon.
Thank you for having me. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you. And joining us now is Michael Bender, who hopefully will turn on your camera. Michael, I hope you're there. You know you're there. We'll give you a moment to turn on your camera. There you are.
Hi.
And hi. Thanks for sticking with us. See, this just shows we're not a well-oiled national show with lots of preparation.
We don't have a lot of highly paid producers.
Yeah. We'll try our best. So thanks for bearing with us. But I'm very excited about talking to you. Thank you for joining us. Michael is an insider's account of the Trump campaign and the post-campaign. And I want to start out by reading just a passage that got a lot of attention and the paragraph before it. So a lot of you might have heard about an important quote that Michael reported, and this book is a reported book from his years of covering the Trump administration, where Trump told then Chief of Staff John Kelly, and talking about World War II with Trump, well, Hitler did a lot of things. And I know that was a standout quote, but
A hot take, yeah.
read to everybody what you wrote beforehand, which I think shows a mindset that you see in Michael's book. He reports and analyzes, and that is a gift that a reporter usually doesn't have to do both. You know, some days I struggle just to do one, Michael. So let me read this.
Thank you, Lynn.
So he's talking to then Chief of Staff Kelly. And they were talking about something. Trump's response it was about a situation having to do with the history of, I think it was Juneteenth, and law and order. Trump's response was also impaired by his stunning disregard for history, particularly compared to most other modern presidents. Senior officials described his understanding of slavery, Jim Crow, or the Black experience in general, post-Civil War, as vague to non-existent. But Trump's indifference to Black history were similar to his disregard for the history of any race, religion, or creed. Michael, in your reporting, did you find that his disregard grew during his presidency? Did he believe that ignorance actually suited him?
That's a good question. I actually found the opposite, Lynn. I did a lot of reporting too on kind of pre-White House Trump, right? And I went back and I looked at his different iterations of running, and I bring that up because in 1980 he not 80 or like 87, right ahead of the 88 race. He was hawking the art of the deal, but he basically has his first kind of campaign rally in New Hampshire. Roger Stone wants to push the book, promote the book, but Trump gives what is essentially the same rally speech he will give for the next 40 years, praising the Ayatollah in Iran, and Gorbachev, and it's not China, but it's Japan, as the country that's making America's leaders look stupid, and his battles with the back and forth with the media in 2000 he's saying the same things. Like he was sort of dismissed all along as a charlatan and as a showman and always just trying to promote himself. I don't know that it was necessarily distinctive in Trump's mind. I mean, what I went back and the videos I watched, the interviews I read, it felt to me that what I watched in 2015 and 2016. I mean, I think he was thinking about running in 2000. I think he was really thinking about running in 2012. So that's a long way to say Trump is kind of the same person all the way along, right? And especially some of these racial issues he obviously latches onto in 2012. I document this in the book too, when he's pushing birtherism. It's Sean Hannity who picks it up and mentions. I pulled transcripts from the show. He mentions it night after night after night for weeks back then, and so Trump sees what the media is talking about and latches onto that. And this was a concern for a long time, right? Whether it's Black history or trying to fully put to rest questions about anti-Semitism. We see that again as a through line through the book here, and I have reporting in there that in the run up to January 6th, General Mark Milley asked other members of the administration if some of the people that Trump was bringing in at the end of those at the end of his term had ties to neo-Nazis. So there's people around him who think he's long had a kind of wink and nod to this extreme, this extremist part of the Republican Party.
Can I follow up with you on that, Mike? And thanks again for being with us tonight. Hi, how are you? So how do you square this ignorance about African American history, Jim Crow? Sounds like even just a disregard for it, with his very intentional push and claim during both campaigns that he had deep Black support. He was also very, very aggressive about making sure he had African Americans surrounding him, bringing them to the White House, and Latinos as well. How do you square those two images? And then would you, based on your reporting and your perceptions of who he is, do you think he's a racist?
Well, maybe the textbook definition. I mean, maybe the definition needs to change a little bit. I don't know, but we know he didn't have some deep support among Black voters in 2016. It did improve in 2020, and it was interesting in trying to suss that out among his political team. And they think it was less of he got some more support from Black men, and he got some more support from Hispanic men. And they think it was the sort of same thing that appeals to white men, which is not necessarily the dog whistles for racism, but the projection of machismo, right? That he was cool, right? That he's got a model wife, and he's been kind of a character in rap songs for years, right? And some of that stuff, he flies around in helicopters, is what really, ticked up that support in those voting blocks.
So I want to just jump to something, since we are the Chicago Sun-Times show.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading your book, and guess who makes a cameo in there but Governor Pritzker, who I saw yesterday when he was at the White House meeting with President Biden and others to push the infrastructure bill. So I just want to it was delightful to see him pop up in your book. I think we're on page 163. Okay, so, and I think we kind of knew that J.B. Pritzker was standing up to Trump, because as we followed his campaign when he ran on an anti-Trump stand. I think he even had commercials that featured Trump Tower in Chicago with it all. So we knew on it. So he's at a meeting in the Oval Office, and they're talking about dealing with troublemakers. And there's a distinction between peaceful people who are peaceful demonstrators and protesters. And as you know, Trump just conflates them. So Trump says they're terrorists. They want to do bad things to our country. They're Antifa and the radical left. And this was on a call, actually. Mm-hmm. After the call had gone on for nearly an hour, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, pointed out that no mention had been made of George Floyd or any civil justice issues at the center of the protests. I've been extraordinarily concerned about the rhetoric that's been used by you, Pritzker told Trump. It's been inflammatory, and it's not okay for that officer to choke George Floyd to death, but we have to call for calm. And we kind of knew this. Trump snapped back, and this is so Trumpian. Instead of have the ability to even debate you on your terms, he switched the subject and went on to criticize Pritzker for his handling of COVID.
Yeah.
Was a whole issue of how the governors were doing. Why did you use that passage what does this story tell you about Trump that was important enough to include in your book?
Well, it's a couple things, I think. I think the call ends pretty quickly after that. He's asked about, and I think it's Pritzker there who asks him, like, we haven't even really talked about George Floyd, right? Right. And Trump messes up his name, calls him Officer Floyd. So I
just lost the thread of thought, is what you thought. Yes. And he didn't know.
Oh yes, and the call technically ends. Some of these things, Lynn, I will admit, sometimes I include just because they're fun. He ends the call like I make a point here that he thinks he's his own chief of staff. He thinks he's his own communications director, and in this call, he's acting as his own call operator. And he actually says #2 if you have any questions. Any questions? #2, which I also thought was funny with like the Twitter hashtag, right? I mean, but that's not why I put the scene in there. That's why I put those quotes in there. But the scene is a crucial day in 2020. Earlier in the morning, he had raised the possibility of using the Insurrection Act to bring troops in to American cities and eventually he tells these same people that he wants to shoot them. He wants these protesters shot to teach them a lesson. Milley's there, Barr's there, Mark Esper's there, right? They're all pushing back on him. It's a back and forth all morning. At one point, and this is in the book, Milley stops him and says, points to the portrait of Abraham Lincoln over Trump's shoulder and says, "That guy, Mr. President, had an insurrection. What we have is a protest."
Right.
So this goes, and this bleeds basically into this call with governors. I mean, some governors are having an emergency situation on their hands, right? I mean, there's want to know the kind of minute by minute updates from what's going on coming from the White House, and instead, Trump takes the call and just goes on the attack and starts telling these governors to knock down the protesters like bowling pins. And Barr earlier in the day has what Barr wanted to do was put National Guardsmen on the street and have a presence where there was at least a sense of calm and a sense of order. But Trump takes that as putting them in there to kind of maul the protesters and uses this violent language. And that's one of the things that come up here, Lynn, is that I think that the theme of this book, from start to finish, one of the themes of this book, we know the story of chaos, right? We know the story of chaos in this White House. You and I in Washington, and my mom in suburban Cleveland. Everyone knows that. This is not a book about chaos. This is a book about how the people around Trump thought he was dangerous for the country and thought he had turned violent in a desperate attempt to hold on to power. And this is just one of the important moments to illustrate some of that.
So this is a very important book, but you kind of brought up something in your book, and maybe you know what I'm going to do or not. So one of the things that Bender is somebody who Trump did talk to through the years. And so I could say, I wouldn't bring this up on my own, but since you write about it, he writes about, and we know Trump likes people who come from central casting. So you write about how when you're interviewing you say the key to my relationship with the president is my hair. Now, everybody who's watching, look at Michael Bender's hair. Okay, judge for yourself what it is that President Trump liked. You have that beautiful head.
He's not wrong about everything, Lynn. He's not wrong about everything.
Okay. He said, "Overly that really auburn mop atop my head, which I wore long enough that it confused my buttoned-up grandmother, but delighted my more spirited and extroverted grandmother." So there we go. What do you?
He's jealous of his hair, Lynn. It's just that simple. Have you seen Trump's hair? I'm sure he'd love to trade his hair.
Yeah, I took that as a deep compliment from someone who thinks so much about his own hair. I mean, yeah, that
also is a key. But I want to get back to something of the people that surround him, because Fox News Tucker Carlson is so much in the news right now as one of the most influential people who are leading the anti-vaxxers, truth deniers, conspiracy theorists, and you include them in your book. And you write that Trump is used to calling Sean Hannity and just getting advice. But when he tried to call Tucker didn't want to talk to him because Tucker Carlson wanted to be a talk show host, not a Trump advisor. So what do you make of, now that we're in current time, not going back in Trump's office, you have that in your mind and you knew the relationship and that he wanted to be a talk show host. What would you say he is now? Just what words would you use, and how do you analyze how he has become what? How would you characterize his influence now?
I don't know. I mean, I remember Tucker when he was starting out. I mean, as a very gifted magazine writer.
I know him. I used to be on his MSNBC show all the time. It was in person.
Yeah. So he's had quite a career already, right? I'm not sure what Tucker's up to these days, but he does make several appearances in this book, and it struck me from my reporting how often it was relayed to me that that Trump kind of always needed someone to phone phone Tucker for him, and one of the times was Matt Gaetz at Mar-a-Lago, that they would call and Tucker would answer and then hand over the speakerphone to Trump. You know, I think it was true and not true. I do have the other, I mean, this is actually well known that Tucker's wife wanted him to go down to Mar-a-Lago and confront Trump over COVID pretty early. And, you know, the interesting thing on that coda to that story is that Trump kind of ignores him. It's Trump has a tendency to kind of drill down into the details, the minutia, right, around him when things get out of control, to try to sort of exert his own control. And it's at this early beginning of COVID, and he's spending a big part of the weekend in the minutia of, you know, the Republican National Convention logos, right? Bringing it around to people and say, shouldn't it have 5 stars? 5 stars like a hotel, right?
And he didn't like that.
Yeah, and the country's starting to burn all around him. It's not until he flies back to Washington and watches Tucker Carlson's show on Monday night, and Tucker rips into him on live TV that, you know, for a moment there, you know, Trump, I mean, took things seriously. There were moments along the way that Trump kind of looked like he might, you know, pivot to a more empathetic or a logical message, but that it really was just pretty fleeting.
So now, Mike, you interviewed the ex-president for this book after he left office. Is that right?
That's right. 2 times down in Mar-a-Lago.
2 times. Mm-hmm. Right. And the interesting thing I've been reading about all the books, I think you're like sort of the first big one to come out, but there's a whole slew of Trump books that are on the way out, and many of the authors were able to access him for interviews. Mm-hmm. Why is he talking to you? I mean, I'm sure it's great as a reporter to get him twice, but why do you think he wants to talk to you, and what did you learn in those interviews?
Good questions. He wants to give his version of things, right? I mean, he wants to be talked about. He wants to be in the headlines, and I'm not sure it matters really at the end of the day that much to him if it's a good headline or a bad headline. I mean, he told me over and over again, I hope you write a good book, but it's probably going to be a bad one, and then he invited me down again, and then he invited me to dinner, and then he invited me down again, and so he's talking to reporters for his shot, right? It's for his shot to get his message out, and he is very focused on his message right now, which is election fraud. I spent a few hours total in interview mode with him, and almost every question came back. The volley back from him ended up being about missing ballots in Georgia, or conspiracy theories in Arizona, or what have you. I caught him in an interesting time, although it's kind of always an interesting time with Trump, I guess. But this was the transition. He really was as unprepared for the post-presidency as he was for the presidency itself. He flies down to on Air Force One for the last time, gets out of off the plane and turns to me and says, "Well, what do I do now?" He brings his staff to a room at Mar-a-Lago for them to set up shop. Literally, there's mattresses on the floor. The staffers have to go to Office Depot and buy desks and chairs to start up this office. But by the time I had gotten down there, he was playing golf up to 36 holes a day. He looked like he'd lost a little bit of weight. Some color had come back to his face since he'd left the White House. It was really, I think I called it in the book, transitioning from the leader of the free world to the king of Mar-a-Lago, to the king of Palm Beach.
Right. That's your final line in the book. Now he was the king of Mar-a-Lago, which kind of made it look like a sad ending, because clearly, is that what you think will be the case? Is he bouncing back? Is there a sense of, well, let me put it this way. Now, you also write about how the most obsequious and submissive staffers are the ones that lasted the longest. Mm-hmm. He did decide to run again, and I'll ask you that question directly, what you think in a moment. Do you think people like Kellyanne Conway would ever be there again? You write about how he went through Brad Parscale and Stepien, but who would really be with him of the gang? Would anyone?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the thing with Trump world, is that you're never really out, right? I mean, the revolving door is a very apt metaphor. Everyone is. I mean, this is in the book. He was trying to bring back Steve Bannon to run the campaign, and Steve had a moment of clarity and said, "Hell no, I'm not." He was turned down several times, Trump, to run that campaign. But I think, Brad Parscale tried to come back in 2016, or in 2020, after he'd been demoted. I think Kellyanne would probably come back.
So she's writing her own book.
Well, I was going to say, this is, I didn't really want to mention any other books.
I'm sorry.
But no. It'll be very interesting to see what she puts in that book and how she describes him.
Here it is. Remember, we're talking to Michael, the author of this book. But it is.
I will say
that he's a staffer, not a journalist. So
yeah,
that's why I
think No, definitely. I'm just kidding around.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think, Mike, he's talking about running again. Did you talk to him at all about that during the interviews? What is your take on that?
I think he's going to wait until after 2022. I don't think that he's actually, I know that his team around him has tried to convince him to wait, right? Because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Really in any world to make a commitment one way or the other right now
until after the midterms.
Yeah. And I think he realized that, and I'm not sure that I know he keeps saying that he's made his decision and tune in and we'll find out and you're gonna love it and all that stuff, but I'm not going to take him on his word on that one. I'm going to chuck that one up to a little bit of promotional material, but the way I tried to talk to him about it down in Mar-a-Lago was I was asking him about Mike Pence, and he, because it seemed like that relationship maybe had frayed after January 6th. I mean, call me crazy, but one man's life was in danger along with his family, and the other one thought that his friend had committed treason to out of an act of disloyalty to him. So. I wanted to see how that was going, and they're talking, right? Like that's out now that they were, they've had a few phone calls. But what's striking to me was that they don't talk about it. They don't talk about this January 6th stuff because I asked. The way I put it to Trump was, "Has Mike Pence apologized yet?" I mean, if you think he's, committed this treasonous act, that surely he must want an apology before he would get on the phone with someone like Mike Pence. Surely he would demand an apology before he ran again, right? I mean, he said, and literally his answer to me is, I don't bring it up.
Would you think if he decided to run in 2024 that Pence would be on the ticket?
I mean, Trump was certainly leaving the door open to that. I mean, there's certainly, talking and I want to hear from Mike Pence. Why do you take that call without Trump apologizing for what happened that day?
Well, did he say what they talked about at all? If they didn't talk about January 6th, what did they talk about?
Right. I think the answer to that was like election fraud, right? He brought it like everything. It really was like everything he ended up with, how he.
No matter what question you asked, including what day of the week is it, the answer is the election was rigged, Michael.
I mean, that's like a very slight exaggeration. I mean, it was tough. I mean, he brought me down a second time. I thought we had ended the first. This is actually kind of interesting. He ended the first interview. It's never happened to me before. I've interviewed him in Trump Tower, on Air Force One, in the Oval Office. He brings you in for half an hour and you spend an hour or an hour and a half, very purposefully. He wants you to think you spent more time and how great it was, and it's smart. This one he cut off and went into his own room. That was the night that Biden was speaking on the anniversary of the COVID lockdowns, and Trump really wanted to watch that live, which I thought was fascinating. Otherwise it was. So we were talking about this one sort of story, and he wanted to come back down. I'll finish that story. I really want to talk to you. I really want to tell you about that. It was some Bill Barr stuff. So I wanted to hear more about that. So I came back down, and it was he refused to talk about it at all. It was all back to Georgia and Michigan and Arizona, Pennsylvania. And I mean, I was honestly kind of confused why he had brought me down. I mean, he seemed to have forgotten that whole first part of it.
He craves attention. He wants an audience. So you're flying back and
well,
forth.
Laura, you're sitting.
He's stringing you along.
I was sitting right in the grand entry of the sort of main sitting room of Mar-a-Lago, like this cavernous room, big couches, right before the dinner hour. So all the club members would be coming in, and Trump would wave and acknowledge some of them, and then be like, "Yeah, hey, it's the Wall Street Journal sitting here."
Going like you're a prop.
Yeah, but for what? I mean, he was the 45th president of the United States, right?
Well, does that give rise to your analysis as to his mental stability? Could you comment on that, please?
Just generally, whether he is mentally stable?
Yes.
I didn't get the sense that it was that Trump. It was any different of a Trump in 2021 that I first interviewed back in 2016.
Which means, was he mentally stable back in 2016?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with Trump, but not that much time.
You say that his shamelessness is political superpower.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you do write about, and we're in our closing minutes, and this is something I think might be an angle in your book that no one else would do, because you actually deal with the people who make Trump what he is, the front rowers, ROWERS. And to everyone who's listening, these are the people who went to, it was like people who go to Fish concerts or Grateful Dead. These people, and you talk to several of them, including a few who you track, they just go to rally, and they form their own networks and friendships. And are they still together now in the post-presidency? And will they still be traveling to rallies as he has them in his?
I'm really, really glad you brought this up, because I do think that this is no other Trump book in the pantheon of the library of Trump books, I think, has done this. A fly on the wall for these Oval Office scenes, really behind the scenes of the campaign, as they spent $2 billion and were still chasing Biden at the end. And I was essentially embedded with these Trump superfans for 2 years. I wanted to know what about them and what about Trump, what they thought about Trump, made them want to come and see these rallies. And I no joke, 40, 50, 60 times. And I think that is a relevant, it's a very pressing question even now, right? I'm asking the same question now, but in a different way, just like you are, is that after January 6th, why are they coming back? And there are thousands, right, in Ohio and again in Florida, including some of my front row Joes. And there's
now, have they morphed into, by the way, election deniers and anti-vaxxers?
Somewhat. That's where I was going with this. Is that there are some cracks, right? I mean, there are some some of them questioning what they're doing and trying to find something else to fill their lives and fill their time and kind of see this as the kind of rabbit hole where this leads. And most have not, right? I mean, if you're going to a Trump rally, you are you're fully vested at this point. But for the first time, when I went back to the rally in Ohio in June, this was the first rally after January 6th. I started to pick up on a little bit of those vibes, and wondering. People kind of pulled me to the side and what do you did what's their fraud? What do you think? In a way that I wouldn't have a year ago.
So here's what's interesting about that group, and then we will close out, and I'll thank you, Michael, in a few moments, and then I have to sell some subscriptions too, because Laura does it in the beginning. So everybody don't leave, because we have to make a living. We are a newspaper, and you're going to hear a very good deal to buy the Sun-Times e-paper.
It was a good deal.
It will be. But
yeah, I heard the beginning.
These front rowers, I think, are valuable to you because you have the history, kind of like your focus group, right? If you can't if I am interested in what will convince people of what is true.
Yeah.
I don't want people to say today is Thursday and then you say back to me, if you say so, Lynn. When I feel that's where we're at. And if what's interesting is because you have their history now, if there is something that will get through to them, either and just on the vaccine.
Yeah.
what is it? What and how can things be communicated? It's just interesting that you included them as I guess we see what goes on. Maybe.
Well, yeah, because I wanted to give the human side of this, right? I mean, they're effectively misled. Trump at the beginning makes their lives bigger and richer, as you were saying. They make new friends. They start traveling more. They're taking road trips together. They're empowered in a lot of ways to stand up for themselves at work and in relationships I kind of wanted to understand the personality behind some of the politics here, but at the end, it's the reverse happens, and their lives become smaller again, they've lost relationships, and they have their news sources have shrunk. Sandra, who's in the book, a backdrop, the music background of her life has been but the last couple of years has been Fox News. When Fox News calls the election on November 3rd, she shuts it off and stops watching news altogether, and it becomes more Facebook and what she hears. And Libby, I asked her why she comes back to these rallies over and over and again. She says, "Well, how else would I know what was going on? I didn't come."
Wow. And I read that was frightening. And so kind of ending on a downbeat, even though everyone now has had plenty of time to look at your wavy hair, Michael. I join you very much for joining us, and good luck with your book. And thanks so much for spending time with us and our viewers on At the Table. And
yeah. Okay, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. Two icons of Chicago politics to have me on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. Best of luck to you.
Thanks.
So I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me, and usually I do, but I know that the wonderful Brian will throw this on the screen. So the Sun Times is here for you. We have many offerings that are important to you, many platforms that we're on. We have shows like this. We have podcasts. And of course, we have our beloved print paper and this e-edition, which I love, paper.suntimes.com, and just our webpage. So we have, and there it is showing my story being at the White House yesterday covering Governor Pritzker there. Oh, Brian, I love seeing it. Just keep that up. But except I now need the slide that says where you go to buy the paper, because we need subscribers like you. Digital offer, unlimited access. You see on the screens, it's only $2.49 a month. You know, shows like this take some effort to put together, and we can't do it without our subscribers like you. So please, please sign up. So for now, Laura and I want to say goodbye. Hopefully you'll join us again next month for our August show. And by the way, if there's someone who you really would love to have a guest on the show, a newsmaker,
let us know.
Let us know, and we'll see if we can get them. Until then, thank you for being with us. Until next time.